All right, let's dive right into this explainer of Elsie Brown's classic 1920s story, A Shady Plot. We're stepping back in time, breathing in the atmosphere of smoky parlor rooms, fashionable socialites, and some seriously brilliant vintage literary humor. But right off the bat, I want you to completely erase everything you think you know about traditional ghost stories. We are not dealing with evil spirits or terrifying hauntings here. Instead, we're looking at a highly entertaining, supernatural satire that basically uses ghosts to poke fun at human nature. So what actually happens when the ghosts you write about decide to just go on strike? I mean, it's a completely absurd premise, right? But that is exactly the brilliant central hook we're exploring today. Imagine you're a writer. Your entire livelihood depends on crafting these spooky, spine-tingling tales, and suddenly your supernatural subjects decide they're forming a labor union and walking off the job. This sets the stage for everything that follows, and it plunges our protagonist into a really, really unique dilemma. Section 1, the writer's blank page. This is where we meet our main character, John Hallock, who is currently facing the ultimate writer's nightmare. Now, John is a practical, albeit kind of nervous guy who churns out ghost stories mostly just to pay the bills. His editor, Jenkins, is breathing down his neck for another hit, but John is literally just staring at a blank sheet of paper. Zero inspiration.
John Hallock needed a story, but his brain was as empty as a haunted house on a Monday morning.
Zero inspiration. In this right here perfectly illustrates the genius of Elsie Brown's title. A Shady Plot is doing double duty. It literally refers to the storyline John desperately needs for his editor, but it also points directly to the highly suspicious, chaotic marital misunderstanding that is about to completely upend his life. We're being set up for a collision between a literary problem and a domestic disaster. Okay, picture this. John's sitting there, completely stuck, when suddenly the room begins to change. And I love how cinematic this moment feels. It's not some cheap jump scare. It happens frame by frame, almost like a slow developing photograph. First, just an arm appears hovering in the air, then a sleeve, then a skirt, and finally, a complete, very confident and rather sarcastic ghost named Helen fully materializes right there in his study. John doesn't even scream. He's just frozen in absolute shock, mostly because he didn't actually believe ghosts were real in the first place. And then Helen drops this massive bombshell. She casually looks at him and says, "We've been supplying writers with plots." Boom. John's entire career, a total lie. He hasn't been coming up with these brilliant ghost stories on his own at all. Helen explains that she belongs to a highly organized, secret, ghostly organization called the Writers' Inspiration Bureau. They're the ones secretly implanting ideas into the minds of writers suffering from writer's block. So John is left completely speechless, realizing his artistic success is entirely thanks to ghost labor. Which brings us to Section 2. Ghosts go on strike, because Helen hasn't just popped in to offer a friendly writing prompt. No, she is here on official union business, and she's delivering a very severe warning. The ghosts are absolutely furious. You see, the 1920s public has become completely obsessed with Ouija boards. Instead of letting spirits rest, people are constantly summoning them to ask ridiculous, trivial questions day and night. The spirits are utterly exhausted. So Helen announces an official ghost labor strike. They aren't helping writers anymore, and they are definitely not appearing at Ouija sessions. She gives John a strict ultimatum. If he ever wants their help with a story again, he has to stop people from using Ouija boards.
We're on strike, John. The Writers' Inspiration Bureau is closed. All you humans do is call us via Ouija boards for silly questions.
Ouija boards. Section 3, the Ouija board craze. And let me tell you, this brings us to the absolute worst possible timing in literary history. Just as John is promising Helen that he will stop people from using Ouija boards, his wife, Lavinia, walks through the front door. Now, Lavinia is fashionable, she spends money freely, and she absolutely loves chasing the latest social trends. And what's the latest trend? Yep, you guessed it. Lavinia has proudly bought a Ouija board and invited her entire book club over for a Ouija party that very evening. John is thrown into a state of sheer panic. He's completely trapped between a sarcastic ghost's ultimatum and his wife's immovable social calendar. He begs Lavinia to cancel it, but she's having none of it. So the evening rolls around and the chaos unfolds exactly as John feared. At 8 p.m., the lights go down, the ladies gather around the board, and John is reluctantly dragged in to partner with Lavinia's friend, Laura Hinkle. For a whole hour, absolutely nothing happens. But then, right at 9 p.m., the planchette suddenly starts moving aggressively across the board. The ladies are thrilled. They think they've contacted a spirit. But at 9:15, the board starts spelling out a very specific name. Helen. And through the board, the spirit furiously spells out one word directed straight at John: traitor. It's Helen. She is furious that John is actively sitting there participating in the exact Ouija craze she just ordered him to shut down, so she's sabotaging him from the other side. And all the ladies at the table are just eagerly watching the board spell out messages from this mysterious Helen, who seems to know John very, very intimately.
Oh, John, don't be such a spoil sport. The board will tell us everything.
Intimately. Section 4, a hilarious misunderstanding. This is where the supernatural complaints of an overworked ghost crash headfirst into very mundane human drama. Look at the stark contrast here between what Lavinia perceives and what is actually going on. Lavinia doesn't jump to the logical conclusion that a ghost from the writer's inspiration bureau is communicating through a piece of wood. Obviously not. She reaches a very human, very jealous conclusion. She assumes Helen is a real flesh-and-blood woman, a secret lover that John is having an affair with. John tries to explain, but I mean, how do you even tell your wife, "No, honey, she's not my mistress, she's a ghost on strike"? Every single denial just makes him look guiltier. And this miscommunication spirals out of control so fast it'll give you whiplash. By 9:30, Lavinia is completely convinced of the affair. By 10 p.m., word of this haunted Ouija board reaches the kitchen, and their highly superstitious maid, Gladolia, gets completely terrified and threatens to quit on the spot, adding even more comedic chaos to John's plate. And by 10:30 p.m., the situation reaches a total breaking point. Lavinia is furiously packing her bags, getting ready to walk out on John forever. This right here is the true satirical genius of Elsie Brown's work. Think about it. A ghost nearly destroys a marriage, but not by haunting the house or rattling chains or being terrifying in any way. The ghost destroys the marriage purely by accident, through sheer misinterpretation. It's a fake love triangle where the other woman literally doesn't even have a body. It really highlights how quickly we, as humans, will project our own insecurities onto a situation. Luckily for John, he is saved at the 11th hour. Helen finally realizes the incredible damage she's accidentally caused. She materializes one more time, but this time, Lavinia can actually see her too. The truth is finally laid out in the open. Helen just bluntly introduces herself. "I'm Helen, the ghost." She clears John's name, explains the whole Inspiration Bureau thing, the strike, and the Ouija board interference, and just like that, Lavinia's suspicions evaporate. The tension is gone, and the marriage is saved. Which leads us to Section 5, the perfect ironic plot. So the dust finally settles, Helen goes back to the spirit realm, and John is just left sitting in the quiet of his study again. But things are fundamentally different now. He looks down at his blank piece of paper, and the realization hits him, at last I have my ghost story. He spent the entire day desperately begging for a fictional plot, only for life to just hand him a real one on a silver platter. The absurd, terrifying, hilarious evening he just survived, the striking ghost, the Ouija craze, his wife's jealousy, that is the exact story he needed to write. Ironically, the bizarre experience itself becomes the very explainer of the source material we've been analyzing.
We are striking because of your Ouija board obsession. With the misunderstanding cleared, John finally wrote his masterpiece.
When we take a step back and break down the overarching themes, we can really see how masterfully Elsie Brown wove all this together. She gave us a fresh take on imagination, showing us that creativity usually strikes when and how we least expect it. She brilliantly satirized the 1920s blind superstitions and that whole fascination with the occult. And she really highlighted the dangers of miscommunication in marriage, showing how quickly appearance can be mistaken for reality if we don't just talk to each other clearly. And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway. Why does this century-old story still matter to us today? Because the core message is completely timeless. Trust is stronger than suspicion. If Lavinia had just communicated with John instead of jumping to wild conclusions based on partial information from a parlor game, that entire crisis could have been avoided. It's a hilarious but very real reminder that having a solid foundation of trust prevents so much unnecessary chaos in our lives. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to reflect on today. In our fast-paced world of texts, emails, and social media, it is easier than ever to misread a situation. How often do we let a simple miscommunication, a half-heard conversation, or an unverified assumption write a shady plot in our own relationships? The next time you find yourself jumping to a jealous or fearful conclusion, take a breath, communicate, and just make sure you aren't creating a ghost where there isn't one. Thanks for joining me to explore this brilliant satire today.